I also, before Shelly starts talking, I wanted to just give a little bit of premise. This session is about volunteer recruitment, but an important step to be ready to recruit volunteers is knowing what you're asking them to do. And that step is often skipped. And there's, our chapters often know, and myself, we know that we need volunteer support because there's so much work we could be doing. And we're reaching out and saying, we need people. We start recruiting, but we don't have clear actions for them to take. And so a critical first step before recruitment is being prepared to actually work with the people that you're recruiting. And so that is one of the big reasons why I wanted Shelly to speak. Shelly was the volunteer coordinator in Portland. Are you sharing your screen now, Anna?
Sorry, I was just trying again because I actually had some pointers on that, but I'll stop.
Oh, that's okay. And Shelly developed this really cool volunteer matrix. And so that's sort of a little bit of the background on why I wanted Shelly to come speak with us today. And do you actually see the volunteer matrix on your screens right now? Yay. All right, take it away, Shelly.
Yeah, so this came about after a couple of planning retreats where we kind of, for the Portland chapter, we had a lot of really, really big goals and not quite enough strategic plan of how to accomplish them. Luckily, we kind of took a step back and we're like, okay, we want to, conquer the world with all 5 volunteers. How are we going to make this happen? Okay, we probably should cut back on some things. So through the planning retreats, we were able to fine tune our goals. But one thing I think we did really well is we really empowered the program leads to kind of be the managers of that program. But you can't do everything alone, which is what our program leads really were guilty about. We had borderline the problem of overly dedicated volunteers, which I think is probably, well, actually, I've seen, I know, Mike, you're the same way, or equally as passionate and committed. And I do see a lot of that with Surfrider. But I was very worried about burnout. And the best way to do that is to allow these program heads to actually just operate as a program head and not be the person that is doing every single little thing. And so I kind of push back and challenge the teams to be like, okay, if you had 100 volunteers right now, what would you do with them? And none of us really had a good answer. And so I wanted to help create a way that for people to frame what kind of volunteer they're looking for, and to also be prepared to meet your volunteer where they're at. So say somebody wants to get involved, but they only want to stick their toe in the water, which is okay, that's great. We'll take the toe in the water, but we need to have a task for, if you only want to commit 1 hour, 5 minutes, what can we have you do? How can you still help? And that's kind of where, you can't see me pointing at the screen, so that's not going to help. But the first column, that simple one, if you have a volunteer that wants to put in 5 to 30 minutes, it's a one-time task, requires limited Surfrider knowledge or limited skill. They don't have to be a graphic designer or anything like that. So you can kind of have anybody step in and do this role. And then they were involved, and hopefully it was a positive experience. And then you can lure them in for more commitment, which would be kind of the moderate tier. Does this make sense so far? I feel like I'm talking really fast. Okay. Yeah, so we had each, committee or program leader look at different ways that they could, if they did have a volunteer that was willing to do a simple commitment, a moderate commitment, or get fully committed, what could you have that person do? And it really took us some time to figure out, how would I use that volunteer? And the moderate commitments were almost the hardest ones. If you have somebody committed, you're like, sweet, get them in here planning and, helping run events and doing cleanups and things like that. We know what to do with committed volunteers, but it was the moderate tasks that I found to be really challenging. So, and that's kind of the onboarding task, because the simple task, that might be somebody just, as Charlie calls it, the slacktivism. You click the link, you fill out the thing, moving on, back to scrolling on Instagram. And so that might, hopefully we can get their attention, but a lot of those people you're not going to be able to. That moderate role, though, I think is really where to focus on kind of volunteer recruitment and to having really fleshed out, easy way that these people can be successful. One example of this is we had the Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard cleanup on MLK Day in Portland. And I don't remember if it was the first or the second year, but we were expecting maybe 30, 40 volunteers, and we had over 100. Great problem to have, but as people kept coming, we already had all hands on deck, and it wasn't enough people to help coordinate it. And so luckily I had too many kind of the logistical maps and the plans and everything on hand. And I tapped 2 of our volunteers that had been showing up a lot. I was like, hey, guess what? You just got promoted to like assistant route leader. And so, but the only reason that worked is I had the map already printed and was able to give them something to have them be successful. And it was an easy ask. It was that 30 minutes to, I mean, it was an hour task of something they're already doing, except in this role, I was basically like, this person has the map, follow them if you get lost. And then they kind of like waved and just stayed on route and made sure nobody got ran over. So it wasn't a huge ask, but because I was able to hand them the route and kind of understand the logistical plan, we were able to quickly kind of deputize the next people and like, you're now in charge because we're overwhelmed over here with how many volunteers we have. Again, great problem. But being able to empower people with a clear task that actually has some framework to it and a beginning and an end, and they know what to do. And it's not, oh, we need help with stuff, and it's this fluffy thing. They don't actually know what to do. They're kind of on standby waiting to get involved. One thing that's been really interesting, since I did move out of state and I miss volunteering, and so I've been trying to explore out here different nonprofits to get involved in, and have kind of gone to a couple of volunteer onboarding things. It's been great to see it with fresh eyes again and be like, no, that's not like, I want to volunteer, but you're not actually telling me what to do. You're saying like, you need help, or like you need some event help at some point. And again, you really need that, like, I need you here doing this with like this thing until this time. That's what I need you for, is like right here. And you're like, oh, okay, I can do that. And that's when you get people involved. And I think that's where there's just a lot of opportunity for really clear, like you have to almost treat it like a job description, but maybe it's a task description. And I think that's where you can get people committed because they know what they're committing to. But having the tiered, thinking through the activity of what would you do if you had 100 volunteers knocking on your door is something I know our team struggled with. And this was a helpful activity and really challenged us to think of some moderate commitment levels for new volunteers. And that we did kind of see a couple people sticking around a little bit more. I will say, full disclosure, we didn't use this quite as much as I was hoping. And I don't think it's been updated in a few years. I think the framework is really good and is definitely worth fleshing out and continuing to use this as a mental exercise. So I think it's worthwhile. And yeah, I hope it brings value to other chapters.
And thinking back when you developed this and some of the conversations with the chapter, some questions to help identify some of these tasks that I think were helpful, especially because when we're busy, we're in that mindset of like, I don't have time to train someone. That's thinking very short term versus long term, when if you actually train someone to do it, they're going to be able to continually do that task for you. So we thought about like, what's something that's currently in your responsibilities that maybe you aren't super strong with. It takes you longer than it would take someone with more expertise. What's something that you feel like that you're not particularly liking doing that's part of your volunteer role? Put that in this volunteer matrix so the volunteer coordinator can find someone to do it for you. So it requires a little bit of evaluation from existing volunteers, especially those program leads that are higher level, to really kind of figure it out. But it's in a positive light because it ultimately makes their position better.
I think it really can help with burnout as well. It just, so many of us volunteer so hard and it is tiring. We have lives outside of Surfrider. Well, most of us do, Bree. But getting it to be, but yeah, taking that one thing where you're like, come to think of it, I actually really don't like managing the email list. You're like, I don't mind it, but if you can get those tasks that you don't love, don't bring you joy, kind of maybe onto somebody else who isn't as burdened, not quite, a little bit stronger of a word than I'd like to use, but somebody who's less fatigued by that task, then you can kind of keep yourself or the passionate volunteer passionate and, keep it from becoming a job. And the other thing that I really didn't discover until I think our third year, and this was a little bit of a projection of me being unsatisfied with my job at the time, was using Surfrider to as a career building opportunity, but in a really calculated way. And so we had one volunteer that was wanting to move career-wise into more of a writing role, but she didn't have any writing background. And it's like, do you want to build that for your resume? And really discussing it as a career move. And so she started writing blog posts. That's great. Now you have that on your resume thing. So it's almost a build your own internship program. But if you really work with volunteers, I think most of us have a skill we do want to develop, but you can't get a job until you've had a job, that rat race. And this is a nice loophole to get around that. And so if somebody's wanting to love social media and wants to get paid to run social media accounts, put them in charge. Now they're successfully running a media, Instagram social media for a nonprofit. They've got that on their resume. But actually, I think we all know volunteering is good for your resume, but looking at it as a calculated, not just that you're a volunteer, but that you were in charge of this task. So what is it we need to do to get to bridge the skill somebody is looking for? Is there something Surfrider can match that with? And then in a way that allows them to build their resume. And again, that just is still us getting great volunteers who are committed. Bree's great at writing referral letters, and that was really, really helpful. And I can, I do know of another Surfrider volunteer that just landed her dream job, and I can say she heavily relied on her Surfrider experience to get that job. And that's amazing to watch. And I'm really happy that she had that experience. I've definitely pulled from it from interviews as well. Leadership, strategic thinking, that type of stuff. So I think there's so many skills you can gain from it, but actually not forgetting to talk about that these are skills that you're gaining, and not just thank you for volunteering, but thank you for growing your skill with us that you can now use with your career later on, is just another way of talking about the volunteer time in a way that gives the volunteer value.
Shelly. And kind of building on that, Jean is going to talk to us next. I often call the volunteer coordinators the matchmakers of the chapter, because you know the chapter needs and you get to know these prospective volunteers and kind of match them up. And so Jean's going to talk to us about sort of making sure people feel welcome and the importance of following up with prospective or new volunteers. But I do know that Shelly is going to have to leave us soon. So if anyone has any questions for Shelly before she has to hop off in 4 minutes, and then we'll go to Jean.
So I have a question for you, Shelly. And by the way, great. I'm going to get your contact info so that I can pick your brain.
Sure.
My question is, you said volunteer onboarding. What do you mean specifically, or what? I have an idea, but could you just tell us a bit about that?
Oh, I'd say I felt a bit of a challenge with our chapter. Surfrider is almost overwhelming with how many things that we're trying to do. And I saw regularly somebody interested with Surfrider, and then we'd be like, great, we have this program, and this program, and this program, for this program, what do you want to do? And they'd kind of deer in the headlights, and almost get lost in how much we're trying to achieve, which is why I really wanted to have kind of a sample menu of here's these 5 tasks we need help with. Just focus right here. Does any of this make sense for you? We actually ended up doing a Surfrider onboarding meeting where it was a hour and a half presentation basically on the history of Surfrider, and then kind of a little bit of a deeper dive about the programs. And I found that to be kind of helpful. I'm not sure statistically how many volunteers we had stay on from that. And that was kind of where we would have these events, get some people in the room, and then the program leads would have kind of know what their, how committed is the volunteer. They'd have these tasks in their mind, and then they was kind of a, blind date matchmaking situation, like you're saying. So that was a helpful event of just the background of Surfrider and the different programs that are happening for Portland. That presentation is still floating around. I'm sure Bree could send that out. It probably needs some revisions, but yeah, I think getting people to know the full scope of Surfrider is a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, Shelly, I can't remember. This might have been right after you left. But the Portland chapter calls them core volunteer meetings that happen monthly. That's like an introduction, onboarding, like Shelly was talking about, for new prospective volunteers to come. And they asked people if it was literally their first meeting with Surfrider, there was an earlier start time for them to get like the 101, Surfrider 101. And then when the regular start time is for people that had maybe come a few times, and it would be a little more in depth on like, these are the things that we're working on right now. This is where we can plug you in and you can help with the chapter.
That was after my time, but I think that was a really good time management move for them to make. That makes complete sense.
And there were times sometimes when like a volunteer, they didn't have very many volunteers show up, but then all the program leads and many executive committee members were there. And so they would just have a work session together. And it was usually at like a restaurant. So it was kind of a social gathering as well. Well, thank you so much for being here, Shelly. I know you have to get going, but I really appreciate you coming back to visit with us.
Absolutely. I miss you guys. I miss being involved. And it's definitely, Surfrider has not been easily replaced with moving. So happy to be here. And now I have to go to physical therapy, which is going to be way less fun. So it was nice seeing everybody.
Thanks so much, Shelly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Jean, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay. So I just want to start off by saying, thank you, Bree, for asking me to participate, because having literally just in the past couple days taken over the volunteer coordinator position, asking me this made me think about how am I going to do this? How am I going to work with people? And I really liked it that Shelly said, I came for the cause and I stayed for the people. That was awesome. And so welcoming people, I think the tendency is for us to want to tell our volunteers or our prospective volunteers what we need them to do. And I think the thing we need to do before that is we need to find out what makes their heart sing. And so volunteers are our most valuable resource. And without volunteers, we do not have a volunteer organization. It's more important than money. It's more important that even skills, or that we have all the roles filled. The volunteers are our resource. And so the volunteer coordinator role is really crucial. And people, I had written down earlier, people join volunteer organizations because they want to belong and they want to be part of something that's bigger than themselves. So, and if that need isn't met, I think the volunteers don't stay. And what I don't want to do is spend a certain amount of time and energy with a volunteer who only stays a little bit and then goes. I really want to make this an investment. So that we can get these really deep relationships, and so that the volunteers can grow as individuals and grow to understand the organization. So what I start with is finding out what's important to them. So usually I get an email or a text, somebody's been referred to me, and then I usually just email them and say, hey, could we just chat? And I've tried different things. This seems to work better. Could we just chat? And then I get on the phone with them. Well, it's during COVID. I might be willing to say, do you want to go for a walk? Do you want to meet for coffee? Something. And somehow try to connect with them and just find out what's important to them. What do they care about? Who are they? And I take notes on that. And then, and the other thing is like being in communication with them. So I think it's, 2 ears, 2 eyes, 1 mouth. See, listen, try to understand them. And then, of course, being the second part is there's this thing I call, well, I didn't invent it, but it's called integrity, being your word. So when you make a commitment to somebody, you need to follow up on that. And if you can't follow up on that, you need to communicate with them about it. I think that when people are just coming into an organization as volunteers, that's even more important than when you have an established relationship with somebody. If you say you're going to follow up with them, meet with them. So I could say a lot more, but I don't know, Bree, have I covered what you want me to cover?
Yeah, so I was thinking back about a story you were telling me about a volunteer at a beach cleanup and learning about their background. And then you were thinking about, oh, well, they have this really interesting experience that could be cool to have them speak at a chapter meeting, or they have this skill set and maybe they'd be a volunteer at this program. And that was well before you were the temporary interim volunteer coordinator. So you've been doing volunteer recruitment much longer than that. And then you also followed up with this person after you met with them and sent them, I think you signed them up for the newsletter and had followed up with some information that you were talking about. And so that's just, exactly kind of what you were saying, put into practice is the really hearing them, the taking notes, remembering things about them, and then that matchmaking with the chapter. So what's going to be good for the volunteer, what's going to be good for the chapter, and then following up to keep them engaged, keeping your word on following up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've actually had several phone conversations. When I first started talking with him, I was like, wow, this is a cool guy. I'd really like to work with him. And because of his experience, he had been in Antarctica doing work for, 14 years, and people's lives depended on him all the time. Mm-hmm. And so this is somebody I know, has good follow through, can communicate, has good attention to detail. So I'm noticing that. And then also noticing that I just super enjoyed him. And I thought, wow, this guy would be great on our team. And so yes, exactly. And he just talked to me, like most of it was just him telling me about what makes him happy. And then I just had it pop in my head. He could talk about Antarctica. This could be cool. And that's something like, don't try to fit people into a role. Find out what works for them. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't have much experience with it. I'm just starting, but I've already figured that amount out.
You're a natural. And that's getting you also, if you remember, Shelley was talking about that camaraderie piece and how the team functions. And so we're touching on that volunteer recruitment. Shelley and Jean both talked on, getting to know people at events and recruiting them to volunteer. And Anne is going to, I think, attempt a screen share again. And in the meantime, if anyone has questions for Jean, but we are going to dive a little more into that recruitment piece, but it's so important to be ready to recruit.
Okay, my screen share is still not working. So I guess, Bree, either you could share it or I could drop it in the chat and we could just open it on our own Google Docs.
I am opening it right now.
Yeah, I updated my Zoom and now it's not letting me screen share. It's a bad update. Okay.
Cool.
Okay. Oh, now mine says loading.
Now
There
mine,
must be something weird about the slideshow.
Huh.
Oh, do you see it?
No. Oh, yes.
yes.
There we go.
Okay.
Great. So we can click through.
Um, okay. Which slide are we? Oh, that slide, Jana?
I think we can just start from kind of the beginning of the bulk information. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So special guests. And then,
So
yeah, Bree mentioned this, but being prepared for your volunteers. Sorry. Thank you for your patience, everybody. So a key first step is just developing that great elevator pitch, which I bet you have, whether it's for Surfrider or the aquarium or diving, but having that just, what can you say in a short conversation with somebody that maybe you run into at a coffee shop and they see your, sweatshirt you're wearing, or how you can just kind of quickly get your point across. And then having that compelling and accurate job description list, like the matrix that Shelley shared, and that's being exact about skills required, time commitment, what they'll get back in return. Maybe, here's some privileges or gifts or things to look forward to that you receive as being a Surfrider volunteer, and why it's fun. And that can be just personal stories, friendships you've made, just kind of sharing about why you love it too. Thinking about who you're reaching out to, sometimes for short-term volunteers, you have businesses or corporations that are looking to fulfill hours, and that's kind of one type of volunteer. They might just be coming for a one-day beach cleanup, or you might be having college volunteers who want to work on their resume, meet other people in the area, have a chance to get outdoors. If you're reaching out to people for higher level positions like the executive committee, or reaching out to people who are unemployed and people in transition, people who have a lot of time on their hands, want to be building up that resume. So it's definitely important to think about your audience, making sure there's a work plan and making sure there's a communication plan in place. If somebody emails, where does that email go to? Who's making the phone calls? So that people aren't left hanging, because if a volunteer reaches out and emails or calls and then they don't hear back, or they don't hear back in a timely fashion, then I think it makes it difficult for them to actually kind of trust that their time is going to be valued and so forth. And to know your own capacity. If you don't have, it's a lot of work to manage and recruit and onboard and all these things with volunteers. So if you and your chapter don't actually have the capacity to manage volunteers at that moment or for a specific event, just being honest with yourselves and them, because they won't be a happy, valued feeling volunteer if they're not actually able to communicate or get attention. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Couple more things. Giving autonomy. There are some people who just want to be told what to do. Some people who just like to be little worker bees, but some people really only feel good about their work if they get some ownership. So it could be a small thing like, hey, you can figure out how to set up this table or decorate this sign, or a bigger project. You can be in charge of designing this series of Google Docs or whatever it is. Empowering people to take ownership goes such a long way. And also keeping it casual. Don't force them into more responsibility. And especially for newer volunteers, design an easy point of entry, like, oh, hey, you like this? Well, come help us out. Oh, you like to walk on the beach on a Saturday morning? Come join us. We pick up trash and chit chat, kind of that casual atmosphere that I know Surfrider is really good at. Next. slide. Okay, here's just some ideas, different platforms and places to recruit volunteers. So you can go various websites, idealist.org. I don't know if you've ever explored Idealist, but that's a great platform and you can put in a lot of detailed information. Facebook jobs. I know our Florida chapters have been successful at using Facebook jobs to find volunteers. There's Craigslist, Volunteer Match, also local papers, which definitely is more effective for smaller communities. But reaching out to local papers, local radio, local message boards, and that can be online or actual, message boards. Some neighborhoods just have bulletin boards or common places in a park or coffee shops where people are always pinning messages. At events, tabling at events or at our own events, going to schools, whether that's K through 12, community colleges, universities, and going to schools like K through 12, that can be actually recruiting youth volunteers or parents of youth. That's a great place to connect. Word of mouth, of course, friends and family members, and then visibility, having good signs, branding, wearing your swag, whether it's the aquarium or Surfrider or other volunteer organizations, and people might ask about that. Oh, that jacket looks cool. You look official. What's going on with that? And then in all these situations, of course, thinking about the rural versus urban context of just ways of getting messages across, what works in your community.
And since Mike is with us, I just wanted to give Mike big kudos because he took charge of sending out press releases. He actually, we're talking about, how you should match people with their skill set and what they want to do. And Mike came in and filled a need and did a very good job as media coordinator and started sending out press releases, which the chapter, I think, had done on and off through their history, but they weren't at the time that Mike came on. And he's in Newport, and people started coming to events. Like, that's how they heard about them, was the local newspaper. So Mike, if you can just briefly share sort of your experience with the press releases as a volunteer recruitment and advertising.
Sure. In a small community like Newport, the local paper will print anything you give them. They're hungry for copy. So it wasn't hard to get stuff in the paper. Now in Portland or Eugene, it might be, I'm sure it's different, but it actually is fairly easy for the chapter to have a high profile because the community is so small. And the newspaper is a great way to do it. They're very cooperative.
And the press release can just be a paragraph or two, like event details. It doesn't have to be anything too long.
No, it's
right.
It's a way to advertise what's coming up, and the paper here in Newport, like I say, is really hungry. They'll put in what I send them almost verbatim.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike.
Sure.
Okay, in terms of keeping volunteers motivated, let's say you have somebody who's been volunteering for a while, but you're not hearing from them or they don't seem to be meeting deadlines. It's good to just connect to them on that personal level, like Jean was talking about. Maybe check in with them. What's going on in your life right now? What makes for a really good day? And kind of just getting to know them and figuring out, like, well, maybe there's a major life event that's happening that's preventing them from doing their tasks, or maybe they don't actually really like the task they've been assigned or feel confident in that task. So kind of getting to the bottom of it. Maybe they've been assigned to do a lot of interpersonal work, but they're actually kind of shy and that's difficult for them. And then if that's the case, then figuring out, okay, well, what's something you feel comfortable doing with and want to do, and just getting to know them. And then of course, making sure that they know they're making a difference and validating them, letting them know that, yeah, all that work you were doing behind the scenes, here's actually been the results and it's been really positive, and letting them know that to keep them motivated to move forward. Okay, next slide. And then celebrating your volunteers. I think a lot in our society, we're more prone to looking at what hasn't been done or what hasn't been done well, but celebrating the little successes of all kinds, and doing it frequently and giving them gift certificates, toys or swag, or even a cute little, inter-group award or trophy, and thank you parties. And whether, of course, right now everything's virtual, hopefully for not too much longer, but having whatever creative way you can think of, and just frequent appreciations, even if that's a quick email or phone call. Hey, I'm really impressed by the way you did this task, or you should really be proud of yourself for this. And do it frequently. People really thrive off of that feedback. It makes them realize they're doing a good job, and it motivates them to move forward. And also going public with those appreciations. You can call their workplace, offer to give them a recommendation. If they have a LinkedIn profile, you can give them, I can't remember what the term is, but you can write like a reference or recommendation on their LinkedIn, give a shout out in your newsletter. People really respond well to that. A company I used to work for, after about 5 years of working for them, they started doing that in their newsletters. Every couple of weeks, they'd give shout outs to staff that were doing great in the field, and people would check their newsletter to see if they got that shout out. And then they felt really good about it. It was so validating. So, that's the link to the volunteer matrix. And this is, a topic that we can keep talking about and need to keep talking about. We don't have a lot of time now, but always trying our best to be culturally competent and using that JEDI lens: justice, equity, diversion, and inclusion. And this is a lifelong project. So I put a link here to this workbook for social change. And, especially this year, with this year of major social justice reckoning, so many resources have come out and so many things have there's been so much learning and unlearning. And this particular resource is one that I've thought about time and time again. And we'll drop the link, but just to summarize it, when we hear the word white supremacy, that sounds like Ku Klux Klan and all this really horrible stuff, but there's very subtle ways that it can exist in the workplace too. And this workbook really outlines it. And I know for me, it was very eye-opening, this kind of idea of being incredibly prompt and on time and speaking a certain way and dressing a certain way are these subtle forms of white supremacy that don't exist in all cultures. So being really open and broadening our minds to, what are people offering, even if it's not in the typical way that in our Western society we think is very professional or the perfect way to do things. So I know this resource really, really opened my eyes, and hopefully you all can get a chance to read it and think about it as well. So just kind of, yes, expanding our vision of how all people can come together and collaborate and offer up their gifts to this group. So,
and that's touching back on to Jean talking about being welcoming, and some of the work with chapters throughout Oregon and the nation is thinking about how we can be more inclusive, which is really important for volunteer recruitment. And when Anna was talking about those different audiences that you're trying to recruit, especially if they're sort of outside of the cultural norm of the chapter, it takes a lot more intention and learning and unlearning, which is really important that Anna mentioned. And so we've really been kind of thinking about how we do things and what we want our new normal to be like when we can be in person again. Will we still have hybrid events so people who it's not easy for them to leave home for whatever reason can still participate with us like they have been doing for the past year? So really, really thinking about those things, especially with volunteer recruitment, is really important.
Okay, I know we just sort of opened up a huge arena of things to talk about, but we are kind of nearing the end of our hour. But time for just any more questions or anecdotes, or Diane, if you want to share anything from your experience at the aquarium, kind of any final thoughts and ideas.
I have a question to kick us off. Can each of you share, whether it's Surfrider or another organization, how you were either recruited by that organization or how you found them and sought out volunteering with that organization?
Sure, this is Mike. With Surfrider, just like I was talking about doing promotional stuff here now, I knew who they were because it's a small community. And there was, the executive meeting was advertised in the paper, and I was feeling the need to quit bitching and do something positive in the community as sort of my civic contribution. So I sought out Surfrider, but they already had a profile in the community, so I knew who they were.
Thank you, Mike. Diane, I saw Diane unmute and then Dia.
Thank
can
you.
can we do gallery view? Is that possible? Yay.
For myself, the aquarium is a fabulous place, but I think that most everything was touched on here. One of the things at the aquarium, when we're there, we know we are a team and we matter. They always start out with, thank you for being here. And that really makes us feel good. But we also understand we are a team and we need each other to be able to continue on with this. We know what we're doing. We care about the critters. We want other people to care about them so they can help to share knowledge and find out more. But we are a team as far as if we're vacuuming poo or making food or on the road teaching other people about how scary sharks are. They're not. We kill more people than the sharks kill us. It's just, mosquitoes, scary things. But just having the common goals together and realizing that we are in this together and how much we need each other to work through these things. And it really does, I feel personally, help us to feel like a family and that we do matter and we're valued there. They're very thankful, and always welcoming. But though I think everybody touched on everything today, so excellent job. But any of you, anytime, come on over or hit me up. We do know we're a team, and we all are connected in different ways. And the skills from diving to, mixing up whatever, publicity and stuff. So for us anyways, we always feel valued and as a team.
Thank you, Diane. Dia?
The question was, how was I recruited for Surfrider, or how was I recruited for an organization? Or
Yeah.
Well, with Surfrider, I got involved, and when I lived in California, we lived near the ocean, and I'd heard about Surfrider from somebody, I don't remember who, but I was involved there, but I wasn't actively involved. I was like monetarily involved. I mean, I would make donations, but I didn't have the time at that time to like really commit to, doing things. And so when I moved to Oregon, I just immediately wanted to get plugged in, to Surfrider. So I looked up the chapter, or looked up, and I believe I just contacted somebody, and I'm trying to remember now. It feels like so long ago. I know someone reached out to me and then told me when the meeting was, and I came and just really liked the feeling and what the group was doing. You guys, I mean, I love this chapter, and so yeah, I think that's it. I'm feeling quiet today.
That's all right.
Thank you.
Jane, do you want to share your recruitment story? I'm also seeing that 2 minutes till 1 story.
Sure. So we saw a poster, and it was a poster for a beach cleanup. And I said to my husband, Todd, wow, they're having a beach cleanup at Bastendorf. And he said, yeah, I just want to hang out, and have my feet up and not do any work today. It was Labor Day weekend. And I said, yeah, but if we go to the beach, then we're going to meet the type of people that would go to a beach cleanup, and we would have that in common with them. And we showed up, and yeah, Todd hooked up with somebody. We just started doing stuff and just like walking down the road. It's actually Ian Roger. Todd hooked up with Ian, and they just picked up litter. There you go. He asked us to come to a meeting. We became members. Actually, I think we became members right away there. I think we paid got our membership that day. Yeah.
Oh, there it is. Do you see that?
Phil says loading.
I'll turn my video off. Maybe that'll help.
So,
Take action slide.
yes, our action ideas, our brainstorming ways to recruit volunteers in your area. Can think about different demographics that maybe you don't have any recruits from. Maybe you don't have any Spanish speaking volunteers yet, or any high school age students yet, or people who are skilled in social media and you need that type of volunteers. So thinking about your group of volunteers and what's sort of lacking and how you can recruit in that area. And if there's volunteer opportunities that you don't have good descriptions for, really developing that, how much time does it take, what skills are needed, how do they report, etc. And I was just thinking too, because you never know how many volunteers you're going to get. So sort of prioritizing your needs. What are volunteer opportunities that we really need volunteers for? And what are some other tasks that we have on hand? So if someone randomly comes up and says, hey, I want to help out, you actually have something you can give them. Or if suddenly a bunch of people come up, it's great to have ideas on the back burner of ideas that you can plug people into quickly. And then think about novel ways to appreciate your volunteers and enact them. So sometimes like organizing a big appreciation event might feel like too much work right now, but taking that time to make a quick phone call can go a long way. Keep thinking of more things I want to say. I talked to a great woman out in Colorado who works with volunteers in her community. And she said a couple of times a year, they do a volunteer appreciation event, and they couple it with an update from their local city officials. And it's become this great community building thing where the people feel validated and appreciated in public, and they form these relationships with their local officials. And it's just been this sort of like mutually beneficial situation. So that's just a little bit more food for thought. And something that I didn't write anywhere, I just keep thinking about my own volunteer experience. I just graduated from graduate school last year, and there's just volunteer opportunities everywhere on campus. And anytime people offer pizza, students show up. Food is a huge motivator, especially for younger people or people who are maybe in transition. Like, oh, there's going to be snacks there. I mean, you'll get people. Yeah, great. Well, it's after 1, so I don't want to keep you all, but this has been a really great session.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Thursday, we're going to have some great guest speakers talking about how to engage our communities and volunteers into bigger statewide campaigns. So that's going to be a really great session too.
Thank you.
See you Thursday.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.